Welcome back to Piston'd. Today we've got our good friend Doug Crawford on the channel. We're going to talk about the experience of buying our first sports cars and what can happen when we let passion and a bit of peer pressure get in the way of rational decision making. Hey Doug.
Hey.
We're going to get started with a game of top trumps.
Thank you, Cassie. Now, for anybody that's listening or watching to this that doesn't know how to play top trumps, ultimately the person with the car chooses a characteristic. They call it out. If they have the better characteristic, they win the pack. Okay? So let's go. You go first, Cassie. What do you got?
All right. I got the Jaguar XJ220.
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 You get to choose.
Yep. I'm going to go with its top speed of 220 miles an hour.
Doug, what do you got?
I've got a 2019 Porsche Taycan Turbo S with a top speed of 261.
Oh, that sounds fast. I've got the McLaren P1 GTR, only 225. How does that lose? I don't know. Okay, you win.
So I win. Cheers.
The
Thank
guest
you.
wins.
Thanks.
That's the first winner we've had on this show so far. Apart from Cassie, because she wins everything else. Okay, well, thanks for coming down. So, Doug, we've got a few questions about cars. One is the Porsche. You used to own a Porsche. You used to drive that. I don't know how you fit into it. You're 6'6".
You know, just straight push the seat straight to the back, knees up around the steering wheel.
Why did you buy it?
So that's a good question, actually. So it wasn't like a childhood dream. It wasn't something I intended to buy when I was looking for a car either. But it was more a case of convincing myself to just buy something better than the car I was originally looking for. So when I first started looking for the Porsche, I was looking for an Audi A3. So I had set a budget for myself of about £10,000 at the time. I asked the AA to go and have a look at the car from the person who was selling the car.
The Audi.
The Audi, sorry. And basically they had a look and they said, no, don't buy it. It's a write-off. So I went back to the drawing board, said I'll buy something else, up the budget a bit, and eventually got to sort of maybe 30K for a Porsche Boxster. But when I thought about driving a Porsche Boxster, it sort of has a very, I don't know, there's a lot of negative connotation with that car. So I thought, well, I'm at 30K now, why don't I just push it a bit more? And before you know it, I was sort of looking at cars, Porsches for 65K, which was a bit of a schoolboy kind of error. When you're young, you should be putting your money into savings. But I thought, well, you know, let's just do it. I had a chat with my dad. He was like, yeah, go for it. I was like, okay, cool, let me do it.
Like a good dad.
Yeah, exactly. So that's how I ended up with the Porsche. It was also a bit of a disaster with the insurance as well, because I hadn't sort of thought about how much.
Hadn't factored that into the budget.
For your first car.
Just a bit of background here, though. So
Yeah.
I met Doug in 2007, was it?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, so he was obviously into high adrenaline sports. I found him on a exercise bike at the local gym, and I'd recognise his face. And I went up to him and I said, "Hey, we work together. I know you." And he just looked at me. He looked at me up and down. And he just like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" And I was just like, "Oh, we work together. We work together." And then we started doing spin classes together. I don't know if you remember that.
Of course.
We started doing spin
Real men
classes
spin.
together.
Yeah, exactly.
And we started training at the gym pretty much every day. It was a fantastic gym workout. But at the time, we were working for a trading company, and all these young guys had these amazing sports cars. So you'd go down into the garage, and I remember seeing a Ferrari F430, like soft top. You had the Porsche, a bunch of other sports cars, and then a guy came up to me in the lunchroom and he said, "Hey man, do you want to buy my 355 Ferrari?" And I was earning okay money, but I certainly didn't have any money for a car, let alone a sports car. And I was like, "Oh yeah, how much is it?" He goes, "Oh, I'll sell it to you for like, I don't know, 80 grand or something." I'm like, "Yeah, I'll get back to you." And then we became close friends, and then you would give me a lift home in the Porsche, and I just remember your knees were basically up to there. It was a shift. It wasn't automatic.
No, you're right. It was manual.
It was a manual.
It was manual, yeah, and I didn't really fit inside. It was ridiculous. It was, just completely impractical for my 5-mile trip into the city.
But there's got to be something about having that garage with all the young traders in there, with all these amazing sports cars, and that took you from a a 30K car.
Actually, a
Now-
10K car.
A what? 10K car.
10K car.
Pushing up to a 65 plus. And that was back in the mid 2000s. So
Yeah.
like that's a pretty big jump. And I suspect, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, that's got something to do with some sort of social standing within the trading arcade background, all this sort of money washing around and young guys with really fast cars.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think there is a sort of sense of peer pressure to sort of keep up with the Joneses. So there were lots of people who were definitely more successful than me at the time, who were buying all of these fast cars. Like there were a couple of Lamborghinis as well. I think what was the name of the small Lamborghini?
Yeah, it's a
I think?
Gallardo.
Yeah, a couple of. There
Yeah.
was like 3 people with Lamborghini Gallardos in my like trading cohort, which was ridiculous. You know, everyone's like under 30 years old. But yeah, so I did feel a little bit of pressure to up it from an A3
From the
an
write-off.
Audi, yeah, from the write-off Audi A3 to something a bit more substantial. But you know, you just can't go halfway, can you? You can't get a boxer and be like, "Hey, can I be part of the gang?" So you got
Say
to,
bit.
you got to, yeah, exactly.
You got to go the whole hog.
You go to a different garage if you want to park your car. So I said, all right, let me go for something I can't really afford.
Yeah, but
And,
there's a scene in the movie Boiler Room. I don't know if you remember it, and it's like that. There's all these young guys, and they're all doing this sort of boiler room tactics to sell financial services, and they've all got the cars. They had a Lambo, the Ferraris, and there was the opening scene when he walks into the interview process, and who's married to J-Lo. He's now married to J-Lo.
Oh, Ben Affleck.
Ben Affleck is the, and he's like, it was straight out of the movie. What was it called? Glenn Ross. You know, it was a copy of that sort of salesy thing. And he walks in there, and they all walk in, and he goes, "You know what car I drive? A 355 Ferrari." And he throws the keys on the table, and he says, "Do I look happy? You see the smile on my face? Ear to ear." and it's exactly like that. But those guys had the cars, but they couldn't afford to buy any of the furniture for their home. So they had a big home with no furniture in it, and they couldn't afford to buy the insurance potentially and the fuel for the car. So they had all their priorities kind of a little bit mixed up. But you got a funny story about the insurance. What you were going to say?
yeah, well, I mean, it's not funny. It's pretty disastrous, and I don't think I didn't really tell many people about it, but it was. Yeah, it was pretty bad. So after buying the car, you get 1 day insurance to get yourself home.
So you thought, I don't have to think about this until tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, how much can it be? You know, and I was like, okay, let me, after just swiping my card, buying the car from the dealership, got home and called up. I can't remember who. I think it was the name of the insurance company was called Elephant, which is like it's gone bust now. But anyway, called them up. And I was like, "Oh, how much is?" I told them the car and described it, and I just remember this. There was a boy at the end of the phone. He must have been like 21 or something like that, and he quoted me. He was like, "So he goes, yeah, I've got your quote now," and he says it's he goes, "Oh, he's 13,500," and I was like, "What?" I was like, "No, you sure it's not 1,350? It's not 13,500." So okay, let me call somewhere else. Eventually, I got it down to £7,000, which. Was almost as much as the bloody A3 I was going to buy in the first place. So I was like,
what was the insurance on the A3? You reckon $700?
Probably something like that. But it was just a bit of a disaster. And then you have it parked outside the front of your house, so you now spent the best part of about £75,000 on this thing, which is outside your house, and then like. I think it was like 2 days later, I looked out the window and some kid had left his Coke can on the roof of my car. And I was just like, I just felt immediately depressed about the stupidity of my spending, basically.
Well, at least you had to spend it back then. I mean, that's another thing. I mean, most people don't have that. They don't have the opportunity to put themselves
to be stupid.
No, to put themselves into a Porsche, even if they had the chance.
So did you have a moment that did you have any moment, maybe the day with the free insurance, where it felt awesome?
It did, and well, it kind of felt a bit surreal. And I think I've told you this before, Manuel, is when I left the dealership. Again, I didn't really. So I test drove. I think it was an automatic, and then I didn't buy the car. I test drove and bought a manual, and I left the dealership and then drove the wrong way home and ended up in this sort of fairly rough council estate, and then stalled the car. And I was like, and all these kids started looking around like, you don't look like you're from here. And I was just like, oh my days, this is a disaster. And I don't know, like I was like, you might want to ask someone for help, but I was like, I can't ask these guys. So anyway, yeah, it was a feeling of having something that I didn't really want to sort of damage. And to be honest, I did enjoy it at times. Like there were times when you sort of just went out to the countryside and let it, just push the car. And I think, do you know what it was, right? When I got on the motorway for the first time, the thing I really just wanted to see is the back spoiler come up out of the back of the car.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's what I wanted as a kid, is just to see the back spoiler coming up.
What's it got to get that out?
Yeah, so I think it was like 67 miles an hour. Right. That's what I remember off the top of my head. I can't remember.
Did you get to 66? You never found out.
Exactly, yeah. Never quite got it out. I struggle with that. But no, I'm joking, I don't. But it's... that was what I wanted to see. And so, yeah, it was good. It was good. I kind of also feel like back then there was no Instagram, right? So, usually you see people these days doing their big car reveal, which I think is pretty sad. But it was, definitely.
Well, they buy a car and then they go, ta-da!
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, take the. So
I think I would do that.
Yeah,
depending on the car that you bought, I think you
do that, right?
I wouldn't do it to the mass public, but I'd certainly do it to my street.
Right.
The neighbours.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I think, it was definitely, I definitely enjoyed the car, like, when I got it out of London, and yeah, it was good fun to drive.
And you sold it?
So yeah, I did.
Sold it a couple of days later.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Just before the insurance renewal was due.
Yeah, exactly. Before no. So I kept it for a couple of years, but I sold. Yeah, so I think I had it for about 2 years, but I decided to move to Spain, so had to sell the car, and it was it was a disaster, because when you go to get a quote to sell it, it's about half of what you pay for it. So I think I sold it for about 38 grand in the end, which was expensive 2 years of motoring, but it was it was good. It was good fun. But yeah, just sold sort of I can't remember, some local dealer.
So what's the car that you had on your wall when you were a kid then? Was it a Porsche? Lambo?
So on my wall when I was a kid was Michael Jordan.
Yes.
That was not much space for anything else.
Yeah.
But I think I had a book, which was a book of supercars, and the one sort of page that I would always refer back to was the Ferrari Testarossa. That was the car I think I sort of would have loved to have had when I was a kid, and would still love to have it now as well.
Why?
I just think it's so I like the doors. That's, I don't know why, the design
it's
of
iconic, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's iconic. So the doors, I think, there's no other car with those style doors. And I think it's also, I'd probably go for white, like
Miami Vice.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So
I can see you driving one of those.
You sorted that out.
Yeah.
So if you could buy a car now, if you could buy any Ferrari, would you buy that one, or would you buy a new one?
See, that's another good question. So the other Ferrari I really like is a 458 Italia. That's also beautiful. I think it's become a little bit dated now in terms of the look. So, if I had to choose, I'd probably still go for the Testarossa, just because it's gonna last the test of time.
Have you ever driven one?
I haven't. I've never driven a Ferrari. Yeah. I've never driven anything nicer than a Porsche. I think that was sort of my limit. That's my barrier.
Most people would argue that Porsche is the best sports car. I mean, everybody that I'm meeting these days are Porsche fanatics, and same as you, Cass. I mean, we've just met all these people, absolute Porsche fanatics. We haven't met any other fanatics apart from them. And some of the guys have been hosting their own Porsche shows. They host their own events, and they're all diehard Porsche. And I think the rear engine experience, the German engineering, is just like, maybe you just can't beat it. I've never driven a Porsche, so maybe we should swap one day.
Yeah.
That'd when you get your Testarossa.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Swap what exactly?
Yeah, exactly. We'll swap
posters.
Yeah.
Swap posters, exactly.
Yeah.
Although that Michael Jordan Piston'd would be quite valuable now.
I'm sure.
Which
they
one
would
was
be,
it?
Yeah.
Have you still got it?
No, I mean it was. To be honest, it was like the one where the iconic Michael Jordan. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just the same that you see.
The jump shot.
The one where he's basically the same as the logo for his brand.
Oh,
he's
the
a
one
flying-
like that.
flying-
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I don't want to give you more of a hard time, but you've got another funny thing about automotive, which I found out about you.
Yes.
So, more recently, you've bought a family car.
Yeah.
You've gone down the Audi route again.
Yeah.
So, I think that was your original. You eventually got
So
there.
you were trying to right the wrong.
Yeah.
You
Exactly.
wrote it wrong. So, he was attempting to do that.
Yeah.
Fast forward, say, 15 years, nearly 20 years. You've got a wife and 2 kids, and you need an family SUV. And so, you've righted the wrong. You bought yourself a Q5.
Yeah.
And you've driven it home, looked beautiful, got it home, and then a couple of weeks later, then you realised that you had to sell it or something like that. So tell us about that.
Yeah. So, that was just me not doing my homework. Yeah, I know.
I love this.
Yeah, no,
This is great.
It's terrible. But yeah, basically went out and bought a Q5, 3-litre, 2013. So this was actually just before the pandemic or at the start. And found a dealership just outside of London, went out, test drove it. I was looking at the spec of the car. Spec of the car looked like it was good value. So I was like, okay, great. You spend a lot of time sort of like figuring out, are you going to get a good deal or not? Thought it was a good deal. Went outside of London, picked up the car, drove it home, told my mum. She was like, oh yeah, what about ULEZ is kicking in? And I was like, oh my goodness, what's ULEZ?
What's
Yeah,
ULEZ?
what's ULEZ? Then looked it up and then typed in the registration of my car. And it was like, yes, your car is, going to be penalised for
Just for anyone
ULEZ.
watching, ULEZ is
Ultra low emission zone, London. So you have to pay
ultra low
£13 or
emission
£12.50 per day to drive it in the area that I live in. So just to basically turn on the engine and go to the shops.
$12.50.
$12.50.
Yeah.
So yeah,
It was a joke.
sold the car 1 year later.
Did you make any profit on that?
So during COVID, it was I sold it for scratch to a company called Motorway, which came over to my house.
They ship them up north or something,
And
do they?
guy just picked up the car, looked at it from the outside, drove it off, wired the money to my bank account. I was surprised. Like I was like, this car definitely needs a service.
And the next day they removed the ULEZ.
Yeah.
The ULEZ thing.
Yeah, no.
They knew something you didn't know.
Yeah, no. But it's, I guess there was that weird period where car prices went up, right? So,
Yes.
So you timed that well. So you flipped it.
Yeah, exactly. I made money on my family Audi Q5.
But then you bought another one.
But so then I bought another one. Yeah, exactly. I can't stop doing this, going through this cycle, which is okay. It's just a newer version, lower engine size, so it doesn't, get punished by ULEZ. So that's okay. It works. It works. It got me here.
Today.
Yeah, it got me here.
And you can fit in it as well.
I can,
suppose.
exactly. It's slightly bigger than a Porsche, so it's okay.
Great.
What else you got?
What else have I got? Well, I haven't got any stories about guns. Do you ever put any guns in your glove boxes? No. That's good. Don't worry. Don't worry.
No.
Don't.
No, let's not go down that road.
Got any stories about drugs?
Leave that one out as well. Now, I'm curious about. It really is about collecting.
Yeah.
So you made a decision to buy a car that you really, really, really wanted.
Yeah.
You had the money to do it, which is quite unusual. Most people don't. They know the cars that they really, really wanted. Or they want. It's on their walls or something that's been niggling at them forever. They say, one day I'm going to go do this. You were lucky enough to pull the trigger on that, at a relatively early age, but most people can't do that. So I'm curious as to how do you go from, if it's not money, then how do you go from pulling the trigger? Essentially, it's not necessarily the most sensible investment, but it's something that you really, really want. And I appreciate that you pulled the trigger on that. I mean, I want to know that. What about you?
What, can you say that again?
Yeah, I don't know what I'm talking about. It's something about if you've got the money, you can afford it, but it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
And just spending it anyway. So it's not necessarily thinking about tomorrow. It's just you really, really need to have that. And you might not even use it. It could be any item. you've got it in your home. Like I know the things I've got in my house that
You
don't
mean-
have any utility, but I really, really want them.
You mean
and,
that
and I feel
feeling
better
of-
that they're there. I can think, I know that's in my garage, or I know that's in my drawer, whatever it may be. And
But that's a collector mentality.
yeah,
Yeah. You're a collector. You
Right.
like to collect stuff.
right.
Yeah. Emmanuel actually has a pair of World War II binoculars, which you may have seen.
I haven't seen those.
Which, well, next time you come round, I'll get them out for you.
Well, I think,
Which actually, there was like, when I was 9 months pregnant, where there was a World War II memorabilia show.
auction.
Okay.
Auction that we went to, and you know, I already stood out, but I really stood out there.
Yeah.
And we walked around, and then Emmanuel found these binoculars which he'd been coveting for a while, turns out. And
I've
so
done my research.
he'd done his
Yeah.
research, loved the binoculars, and the auction was the next day. So he was at work and wasn't able to attend the auction. So he sent me back down there, and I walked in, and there was a guy in like a waistcoat with a pocket watch and just, you know, like a neckerchief thing, you know, just
Yeah.
like looked like he'd literally walked out of the 40s. And I was like, oh, I'm
Maybe
here.
he's just in fancy dress for the event.
Yeah, I'm here because I would like to bid on these binoculars. And
Yeah,
he's
they must
like,
look at you as
okay.
if you're crazy.
Yeah. And I mean, I felt a bit out of place. But anyway, so I bid on the binoculars, and then someone bid against me. And and so I bid again, and I won the binoculars. And then I spoke to Emmanuel, and he was like, you know, I wasn't 100% sure that you were going to get there, so I went on the auction online.
So he was bidding. Emmanuel was bidding against you.
Yeah,
He
unbeknownst
was
to
bidding
me.
against me.
Ah.
There was only two bidders.
Catching me.
Me and Emmanuel.
I know. Basically,
So, needless to say,
Yeah.
we won the
Right,
binoculars.
yeah. Well, that's about collecting. So I really, really, really wanted them, and I was convinced that there was demand for these things, where there clearly wasn't any demand. But it's about something. It's about wanting something that's already been made, and this is why the World War II. It's an antique. It's all the good stuff, good cars that I like. I'm not saying anything that there's not new good cars coming out there, but the cars that I wanted have already been made. So like there's something about like if you wanted something as a kid, and that's why I asked you a question about having something on the poster, I try and get it as an adult, and I think you see that now. So you look at all the Ferrari F40s and all the 1980s sports cars, the guys and the girls that are now in their 40s are now buying those things, and the price and the demand is really heading upwards. The same thing with the arcade machine. I really, really wanted an arcade machine, so I got one and I fixed it up, and now I feel better about that. But that's purely out of my childhood. But coming back to the binoculars, that was funny. I was so paranoid that there was demand for it that I found myself on the app of this like auction house thing, and I sort of forgot that Cassie had this like paper bid, this mail bid that she took in there. And then I saw it, and I wasn't sure how to use the app, so I just like thought, okay, I'll just in case somebody bids up, she's not going to be able to up the bid because there was no mechanism to do that physically. So I'll just be on the ready with my electronic thing, and I didn't know how to use the app, just ready to go. And so then I went on the level, and I think I forgot what price I'd put in there. I just assumed it was somebody
just
else.
all the blood rushed through his head.
Yeah,
The
and I
excitement
just
of-
hit the button, and I was just like bid it up another £100 or something like that. It was I think it was £1,800 or something like that. It was a lot of money for a pair of binoculars, but they're an antique, and they were made so well back in the 40s that they still work today. So it's incredible. That's another story.
If you need a pair of binoculars,
Yeah,
but-
they're really high functioning.
Yeah, so I think
I'm
you're right.
looking- I'm looking forward to seeing these.
Yeah,
these binoculars.
It's about collecting something that's already been made and is not going to be made again. And so that's why, for me, like I want those supercars from the modern classics because they're around when I was a teenager.
Yeah. Do you collect anything? Do you have that collector mentality? Because I do think it's a mentality. I myself am not a collector.
Yes, you are. You got about 1,000 pairs of shoes.
Fair, but I use them to walk in.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I'll use the binoculars to look out for the neighbours. No, I've never actually
To
used them.
spy on the neighbours. Nice.
No.
No, I don't collect anything. Debts maybe. No, I'm joking. But no, I had a weird obsession when I was a kid. I don't know if I've shown you guys, but basically it's a bubblegum collection. So when I was younger, I collected bubblegum.
You mean like packets?
Bubblegum cards?
Yeah.
Untuned.
With the card and the stick?
Yeah. No. So yeah, just a. So I just like the design.
Hubba bubba.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I've got like, I don't know, maybe
You've
1,000.
still got them.
Yeah.
Wow.
You've got 1,000 packets of
maybe not 1,000.
Can we chew them?
Maybe a couple hundred. Yeah.
of 40-year-old bubblegum.
Yeah.
There's got to be a market for that.
Yeah, exactly. So we're trying to frame them, put it into a frame.
Yeah.
You know, so it's sort of
That would look great.
Yeah.
Yeah. You'll see them. You'll see like all the old like designs of you know. But that was the only thing I collect. So
That is so random.
it is a bit weird. Yeah.
There's
Particularly for someone who doesn't collect anything else.
Yeah.
Do you chew gum?
From time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, but no, I think it's definitely something about like you're making an emotional trigger pull on that asset. Not necessarily bubblegum. I wouldn't say that's emotional, but the car
Clearly it was emotional.
It was an emotional thing. But I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because if you don't do that, you got two ways of doing it. You're either doing it on emotion because you just want it so fucking badly, or you do it and you just look at it as an unemotional investment. And they're two completely different things. And that's why I like the driving side of automotive, and the visceral feeling is emotional, and I fully relate to that. And the investment side, to be a good investor, you need to either get a professional to do it for you who takes the emotion out, or you need to have that skill. And you obviously had that being a professional trader, taking the emotion out of the trade. So it's funny, you had a professional life, which is an unemotional trade in the marketplace, then you pull an emotional trade on the car. So like, I don't think there's any rule to say like you got to do one or the other, and anybody who's like cold enough to be able to only do unemotional investments or purchases is the right way. Like it's got to be a mix of both.
Yeah. So, okay. So when you think about cars and your relationship with cars, do you think about them primarily as like a toy or, something to enjoy, or do you think about them as something that will potentially make or lose you money?
I think of it as something that will 100% lose me money.
Okay.
I do like the feeling of driving though.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so there's a couple of things that I think are sort of almost restrict me from having the ability to collect a car, which is that in London you need space, right?
Yeah.
So you just don't have the space. Like friends of mine in Spain were in the market for a Ferrari Testarossa probably about 10-15 years ago, or maybe 10 years ago, because I think you could probably pick them up for about 40K. So I would 100% be interested in buying a car that I could store somewhere like that, because I'm certain it'll go up in value. And I think you just to look at it and sit in it and just feel like, just experience that little bit of history does motivate me. But yeah, unfortunately, I don't have the sort of the space for it. But I do think, yeah, I like the value of a car is something I definitely consider, and I do think about sort of, are there cars that you can buy that would sort of appreciate, especially in today's world, because it doesn't feel like it. But then, in 20 years' time, it'd be like, oh, actually, yeah, we could have bought one of those for like $5,000 and it'd be worth 20 now or 100 now or whatever. So, yeah, unfortunately, very practical for me at the moment. But do think about, car appreciation with classics and potentially modern cars as well.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you got a utility, which is the car, the family car. That's a utility. You're guaranteed to lose money on it because you buy it new, it depreciates, you get a lot of mileage out of it, and maybe it doesn't have the performance necessarily that you want.
And it gets the crumbs in the back.
Gets the crumbs, it gets dinged up on a regular. But then you've got the non-utility, which, is the sports car or some sort of performance vehicle that you're excited to drive on a Sunday. I mean, that's the dream. You've got the utility for the family and the kids and the day-to-day, and you've got the weekender that you can race around in and get some performance out of. That's definitely what I would want.
And what about the community around the cars?
Well, that's the thing. The communities are massive. I mean, if you tap in anywhere, like you've said many times, like they're self-organizing communities. People are super, super passionate. And if you go to any city and any place, there's a cars and coffee, or there's a meet, and it could be like sports cars. It could be anything. People just, they organize themselves around this lifestyle.
Yeah, when I was younger, there was a big thing about subwoofers in your car, which has a community feel. And so my first ever car was a Volkswagen Golf, and I was thinking about it like back then. It was sort of your aspiration was to have your own car. So this is like high school, secondary school. So when I was about 17, 18, and so having a car was just amazing. And then you would sort of be in a little crew of other people who have got cars, because you'd all like want to meet up and talk about which stereo you've got in your car, and someone would save up a bit of money for a subwoofer. And it was almost like a status symbol if you could go into school and hold. Do you remember the front bit of the stereo?
Take the front of it off.
That you
That's
could,
right.
you could tap out,
clip it off.
Everyone thought it was a mobile phone, but it wasn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, exactly. I did have a mobile phone, but that would be like tucked away. I'd have my front of my stereo, put that down with my keys. A Pioneer, 100% a Pioneer. Yeah. A couple of, it was tapes as well. And it wasn't CDs back then, it was tapes. And I'd have my, walk around with my Pioneer in my hand, slam it
down on the table.
Exactly. I've got a car. Like, you could probably walk around with a Pioneer stereo front and not have a car and still look like, a guy with a car.
The boss.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, coming back to what you were saying about the communities, it does sort of take me back to when I was younger, and it was the idea of having a car was also a gateway into that little group of people who had the same aspirations as yourself.
You grew up in London, though, right? What were the cars that they had there? It was like, I can just imagine like an Ali G style kind of skit with him in some sort of hatchback. Is that what it was? Everyone
had Golf Mark 1s,
right?
So I had one as well.
That was the car.
And if you were sort of lucky enough, you had a Mark 2, and you would 100% get the car lowered. So I had a friend who
sports exhaust.
You get the sports exhaust, the car lowered.
The Mugen body kit or something.
Yeah, you get the, I remember I had a friend of mine do he'd smoke the windows out. So, he'd put the, what's it called?
The tints.
The tint, yeah. You tint the windows. And we all had no money, so.
Recaro steering wheel or something.
Yeah.
The gear knob was like you switch the gear knob out.
Yeah, you switch the gear knob. Yeah. But yeah, you get the windows tinted. I had a friend who would do it for me. And he would come over, and it was like the worst job. Like the number of air bubbles in the window, in the tint, was just horrendous. But it didn't matter. Yeah, you got the car lowered. The most important thing was the exhaust. And then you go over speed bumps. And back then there wasn't that many, but you sort of had to do it in a snake way, because then you would sort of otherwise you'd go over it and you just hear, you hear a horrible, metal scratching sound. And yeah, it was just funny how back then you felt so. That was probably my favorite driving experience, was when I was 17, 18, because it was so liberating, and you felt like you got some serious independence, and you stood out amongst so many other friends who didn't have cars at that age, especially in London. But yeah, looking back at it, I mean, they were the most disgusting cars, like Ali G, Eat Your Heart Out, tinted, massive exhaust, subwoofer in the back, basically almost shaking the windows. But yeah, it was great.
It's amazing none of us lost our hearing back then.
Yeah, exactly.
What did they have in Sydney?
Same thing.
It
was more. Yeah, it was Toyota. It was Honda Civics, and it was Honda CRX, and they had this Mugen body kits on them with gigantic sports exhaust, and they sounded so loud, but it doesn't sound like an engine. It sounds like just something else. They had, lowered. They had the lights on the bottom. Some of them had like murals painted on their bonnets. Incredible things. But I mean, I was obsessed with seeing them, and you could spot them. They're everywhere. They did mainly on Hondas, and then WRXs came out, and everyone had
WRXs. Everybody had a WRX.
Yeah, your brother had a WRX.
That's right.
And your dad, what did he say?
It's a hoon car.
It's a hoon car. Yeah, it definitely was.
What's a hoon car?
No, he said it's a
Hoons is an Australian thing. A hoon is somebody that drives fast or recklessly.
Okay.
Maybe like a hooligan?
Like
a hoon. Yeah. Is that a football term?
No, that is. It's a hooligan. So there's an American brand called Hoonigan. And Hoonigan got the phrase from, it's a car brand, but they do apparel and other events and stuff like that.
And it had, I think my dad said that the WRX had a hoon vent on the front.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. That thing on the front.
Yeah, there was one thing as well that I think, and it'd be interesting to know whether this ever made it to Australia, but to go like from the level that I described before of the tinted windows, lowered, big exhaust. If you wanted to go one level higher, you would get underlighting.
Oh yeah.
So you would be driving down the road
Yes.
with like, just this massive sort of spray of light
Footprint.
coming out. Yeah, exactly. And obviously, if you had all these things on your car, you'd probably be driving fast anyway. But not just to bring a little bit more attention to yourself.
Yes.
You would have underlighting.
Spotlight.
Exactly.
That was a fun time. Like that, you don't really see that as much anymore. Certainly not in the major cities. I mean, we're in Sydney, up in King's Cross. On a Friday and Saturday night, they would be a stream of cars coming up from the harbour up this one road where Cassie used to live. She had a 1 or 2 bedroom apartment there, and it would be banked up till 4 or 5 in the morning. And all the guys,
They do a circle. They do laps.
There's a laps of this block of King's Cross, and they'd just beep and rev the engines, and I was just losing my mind because I could get no sleep there. But looking back, they shut it all down. Looking back on that now, it was amazing. The cars that you saw, the modifications that you saw, the amount of money and time. The people were so proud of them. They didn't get out of their car to
They're
go
all
to the
different
nightclubs or
cars.
bars.
Yeah,
They just
do laps.
literally did
Drive
laps
around.
and then drive
Yeah.
home for the
Yeah.
night. Maybe
and
they
they'd
picked
drive
up
from
an ice
out
cream.
of the city
Yeah.
into
Yeah,
King's
yeah.
Cross to do these laps on a Friday or Saturday night. And then they got the police out on because it was like an intersection where they would stop. And then they got the police because the locals all complained. And so the police would stand on the corners of the intersection trying to, you can't, who knows who's beeping their horns? It's like there's like
Trying to
hundreds
shut
of
'em
people
down.
beeping their horns, and the police are trying to work out who's doing the beeping
Yeah,
so that
yeah.
they can put a stop to the beeping.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen anymore. That's true passion. Like maybe those people exist and they go to car shows, but they certainly, I don't see them around on a regular on a Saturday night in London, just cruising the block. I don't see it.
No, it doesn't happen. I can't. There was a bridge in London that everyone used to go to.
Oh,
I
Chelsea
forget-
Bridge, it
Yeah,
was, wasn't it?
yeah.
That's
Exactly.
right. They used to converge on Chelsea Bridge. They might still do that.
Yeah, maybe.
Well, we should organise a cars and coffee event at one of these places. You can get one of your old VWs back there.
Yeah, no, that would be good. I mean, unfortunately, I think that car got scrapped because it was. Well, again, it was my dad's old car, and it would be been like driven to completely driven into the ground. But I think the fan belt went, and it was a question of can I afford to fix a fan belt, or should we just scrap the car? And I was going to uni, and it was like, yeah, probably best just to scrap it. I think we got like £100 or something for the car, but it was yeah. I mean, I would take definitely a Volkswagen Mark 1 would be another collector's car. If I had space, if I lived in the country with a massive garage, I think I'd put a Mark 1 in there just, for nostalgia sake.
Yeah. It's amazing how people like hold these things close to them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
that's right. You remember it forever.
Yeah.
You remember your first car.
And I think it also builds up a sense of loyalty. So I'd be interested to hear what you guys think, which is, so that was my first ever car, was a Volkswagen, and I had another, like when I moved abroad, it was the like when I went for a practical car, so I bought a Volkswagen Mark 5, but I had a sense of just I don't know, maybe not loyalty, but
Like pride in the.
No, I think it was just a sense of like trust in the brand.
Definitely.
So I was like, yeah, I'll just get another Volkswagen because I know that they
Yeah.
work,
Yeah.
Um,
I had when I was at university, I had a Toyota Echo, which is my version of
Okay.
your Volkswagen.
okay.
And it is the best car. Like 100% hands down. I don't think they made them here, but they're like a Yaris.
Okay.
And I chose it because like it looks nice, but it turns out it drives really well. And my nephew now has it, and he takes it out bush, and it's still like a little machine. And it was a manual, but you put your foot on the accelerator and it goes, it's so much fun.
Cassie tends to have a bit of a lead foot on these things. That's how she gets on the speeding tickets. But yeah, that car still exists, and there's a good story about
Wow.
that. When Cassie's car was living at her mum's house, it developed
When we were here.
a spider's nest started growing in the car, so they had to get fumigated, and there's all these redbacks living in the car.
There was like 9 redback spiders living in the bonnet.
Goodness. Jeez. That's, yeah. You don't want them to jump on you whilst you're driving. You
Yeah,
know.
but in Australia, it's there's, as everybody knows, there's spiders in Australia, and there's this particular spider which is called a huntsman, and it's not
It's not poisonous.
It's not poisonous. It's not a dangerous spider, but it looks like a tarantula. It's it's quite big and it's really furry and brown.
Nice.
And yeah, you very often
Yeah.
see them on the walls and in the corners in the rooms. But there's been several occasions that I remember driving that car in Australia, and on the windscreen comes across a huntsman, like on the inside of the windscreen.
Wow.
And so you're driving along, sort of like one eye on
Yeah.
the
Oh,
It's
God.
happened to me as well. It's
Yeah.
terrifying. Yeah. So what?
All right.
Yeah. So what car for Douglas?
Yeah, so we have a little bit of a closing game, which is if money was no object and you could have any car in the world, you choose 2. One of them is an investment car, and it's for the reason of making money, essentially. And the other car is a car that you drive every day. What would they be?
Well, okay. So I think for the investment car, it's a little bit of an unlikely choice, but I think it's going to be so the first version of Tesla S. So I think that I think it's just
You're banking on the future.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I think it's just there's probably the fewest number of those made, and Tesla's obviously made a big mark in the world in terms of cars. So if you could pick up one cheap enough today, maybe there'd be a chance of making a bit of money in the future.
Thinking outside the box.
Yeah,
It's pretty
exactly.
good.
That's a
Yeah.
little hot tip from me, guys. It's not financial
Yeah.
advice, but it's
What's one of those worth these days?
I have no idea.
Yes.
I reckon, but you know what? I don't think they'll probably be around, I reckon, 30K. And I say that just because I remember looking at what the floor was for Teslas when I was looking for the Audi. So I know I went down that route again.
Yes.
It's like, what should
What
I go for?
What
Yeah.
if I just quadruple my budget?
exactly. So yeah, but I think there's a bit of a flaw, but maybe you pick one up for 20-ish with a few miles on, and who knows, maybe that would be worth some money in the future. And for an everyday car, I think it would just be a Bugatti, just purely for the sake of, just completely overstate, my actual my reality driving around in a Bugatti.
Yes.
Two kids seats in the back.
Glasses on.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, turn up at the school, rev the engine as hard as I can outside the
And
front.
say, get out.
Exactly, into class.
Great.
So yeah, probably something like that.
Yeah, I love it. That's good answers. Thank you. What
Nice.
would be yours, Cass?
I don't know, Manuel.
Well, you got to come up with some answers.
You can ask me every time.
Well, this is the Bugatti here. There's a
yeah.
Veyron. You can pick one of those up for £2 million these days.
Nice.
Maybe I could quadruple.
Yeah.
See if there's only one for 4.
Yeah. In that case, maybe
Yeah.
I'm going to up the ante.
Yeah.
It looks good in black. Right, cool. Well,
Yeah.
thanks
All
for
right.
coming.
Thank you so
all
much.
good,
That
all
was
good.
awesome.
That was
Yeah,
fun.
yeah.
Thank you, man.
It was really good.